These barn swallows, I just counted, I guess there's 10 of them here. It almost seems like the louder I talk, the louder they get. I'll show them too. Oh, there's way more than 10. Finally, 19th century British literature. That's pretty much what this stuff is. I know I'm leaving some major guys out. In a way, from this point on, it almost becomes, which ones do I like the most? It's not necessarily which are the most classic. But I think in general, I try to hit the ones that are the most famous still. Gilbert and Sullivan, they did not write novels they wrote poetry in a way. They wrote these silly operas. Operas never really worked for the English like they did for the Germans or for the Italians or even the French. Oratorios, yes, but not operas. And when you get to this point, really, Gilbert and Sullivan's operas are different. They almost make fun of operas in a way, but they're also brilliant. It took me most of my life before I warmed up to these guys because I didn't understand that it was supposed to be silly. Very, very silly. It was a kind of humor that didn't so much work for me. But The Pirates of Penzance, when that was made into a movie, starring Kevin Kline as the Pirate King, I didn't look up the year of it. That I liked. And then when I looked at it again, I liked it even more. And I finally got past the business and I said, okay, I can get into this. The writing is so clever. He was supposed to be, what do you call it, apprentice to a pilot, but it was a pirate. So he got apprenticed to a pirate. And he was born on February 29th. And so he wouldn't actually reach his 21st birthday until he was 84 or something like that. It's so silly. But I really enjoyed it. And when I would show parts of it to the students, I would usually show the part where the Major General sings, I am a Major General. And he goes very fast. And so in matters vegetable, animal, and mineral, I am the very model of a modern Major General. He sings very fast. I mean, this is very clever writing. And Sullivan wrote the music. He also wrote the hymn Onward Christian Soldiers. I associate him with Westminster Abbey somehow. But I don't know if I should. HMS Pinafore, I think, used to be more famous than the Pirates of Penzance, but I don't think it is now. The Mikado makes fun of Imperial Japan. I don't like it. There was a recent movie made about the writing of it, though. Oh, I can't think what it was called. I don't know. Of all of these, Captain of the Guard, this is the only one that I really like. But people do like him. There's societies that put him on. H.G.Wells, well, I often called him the second most famous science fiction writer of all time. The most famous, a Frenchman, I'll be telling you about him soon. That was my opinion. But in English, I think he's got to be the most famous, who wrote originally in English. War of the Worlds, I suppose, is his masterpiece. I like to point out to the kids that this book killed some people in the United States. And they go, what? And there's usually some kid that knows it. When that was broadcast as an April Fool's Day prank, as a radio show, and it was broadcast as if it were really happening, there were some people committed suicide. It caused a panic. It's the first famous treatment I know of invasion of aliens. I also like to point out that I believe the movie was called Day After Tomorrow. I think it was, where aliens invaded again, and it was kind of a modern take on it. And what saved the world back in H.G. Wells was the common cold, a virus. The Martians didn't know about it. They got sick and they died. Well, in that, if I have the right name of it, Day After Tomorrow, I hope that's it. I'm not sure. But anyway, in that one, a virus, a computer virus, is introduced into the ship, and that stops them. The Time Machine. I read that. Actually, there was a time where I read almost every one of his books. The Time Machine, I really liked it. I think that's his greatest, my own personal choice. And when it was made into a movie in the 1950s, I think they did a very good job of it. And I often, if I had time, like to show the kids the first 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes of it, where he explains about traveling in time and gets into his time machine and starts it up. And I also like to point out, if any of you do watch that, the theme of time as recurring, either as the ticking of a clock or it keeps showing up again and again in the first 10 minutes of that. Really a great movie. The Invisible Man, maybe not so famous. The Invisible Man, but famous enough. Food of the Gods. I read them all, and as I said, they're not all equally famous, but good stuff. I'm giving you basically a reading list for the rest of your life, kids, if any of you are watching that are 14, or any of you. Rudyard Kipling. Well, by the time we get to him, we're now getting to the end of this period. He died in the 1930s, I think. He might have actually lived almost to the 1940. But I think of him as Victorian. He's associated with India, but he was British. I think he was born in India, I think. His parents lived there, and his most famous works are about India. By far, The Jungle Book is his most famous work. Here in the original Classics Illustrated, there was The Jungle Book, 15 cents. And then when they started to come out with these again, there was The Jungle Book. Kids usually know it. I think Disney did a reasonably good job of that, and the kids usually know it. So that when I was teaching grammar, and I said the bare necessities, if I'd say, look for the kids, look for the bare necessities, the simple bare. I still remember a particular kid, maybe I told you this already, a boy. That was all he needed. He took off and he sang the whole song spontaneously. A kid that, like my Barnsfalls, he liked to sound off anyway, but I liked it. Rikki Tikki Tavi is a short story done as a very good cartoon. I taught beside a teacher that really, even though she taught grammar, she loved to show the kids that. And I like to point out about that the father wears a three-piece suit and a tie, even though it's India, when he sits down to eat with his family. Well, that was the proper way to be. That's one of the things about back in the time machine, if you see that. If you see the way the woman is dressed and the interior of the apartment, you're seeing Victorian England. I'm jumping back, but in Sherlock Holmes, in the young Sherlock Holmes, right at the beginning of that movie, the narrator says it was the height of the Victorian era, as you see London at that time. Gunga Din, about a native Indian who was a loyal water carrier. The Man Who Would Be King. This is a poem. He wrote a lot of poetry, and good poetry. The Man Who Would Be King is a short story done into a very good movie. I can't remember his last name, but it was done as a very good movie. Better, in that case, I think the movie was better than the short story. Captain's Courageous is different. That's about the New England coast, Portuguese fishermen off the New England coast. And a boy is the main character in it. Kim, I tried to read this fairly recently. I took another look at it, and I wasn't as taken with it as I originally was, but sort of like the India equivalent of Tom Sawyer, in a way. One of the things I should say about Rudyard Kipling, though, is here is the British Empire, when with the whole idea of the white man's burden to go out and civilize the world. He was like the writer for the British military in a way. I think he was so loved, so popular, and I think so rich by the end of his life. Well, I've skipped a lot of major ones, but tomorrow I'm going to turn to what was going on in the United States at this time. See you then.